I recently created a few videos on the Elementor plugin Woolentor, and several times in the comments of those videos I was asked to also take a look at Woolentor, another WooCommerce and Elementor based plugin. Well, I bought a copy today to test out, and in this video I'll be going over how you can use Woolentor to create more unique and custom cart and checkout pages for WooCommerce. These are generally the pages that are the hardest to customize, and Elementor doesn't currently have the ability to edit the actual cart or checkout sections of those two pages. Woolentor extends Elementor's functions and allows us to edit those two key pages in various different ways. In this first look video, I'll walk you through some simple customization and show you the key options you have inside the Woolentor plugin. Now, as always, all the links to everything covered are in the description below. This video isn't sponsored in any way. I purchased the plugin to be totally unbiased and simply provide you with the information to make your own informed decision as to whether you feel this plugin is worthy of your time and or your money. Okay, enough of the jabbering, let's take a look at Woolentor. So let's start this off by taking a look at the current pricing for Woolentor, and we'll then take a look at what you kind of get in the package. We've got two options. We've got a yearly license and we've got a lifetime license. Your yearly license is going to give you one website, 5 websites or agency, which is unlimited websites for the price you can see on screen right now. This is running a 40% discount currently, which is to do with the current situation in the world, should we say? But if you wanted to grab that, you are saving yourself a nice 40%. Lifetime, there's the pricing you've got for the lifetime. So if you find this is useful, you're working with customers, clients, and you want to create more customized WooCommerce sites, this could be an option that you think is going to be useful, and then maybe the lifetime option, one of these three might be the best idea. What I've done though is I've grabbed myself just the single site license and the personal for 1 year so I can test this out, and that's the most important thing here. This is not a bias test. I am literally paying for these plugins, testing them out, and then I'm showing you what they can do. I'm not going to be giving you my opinion. I'm not going to be telling you whether this is a good plugin, a bad plugin. I'm not even endorsing it in any way. I'm just bringing it to you because I know a lot of people are interested in how they can take a tool like Elementor or Elementor Pro and how they can use that in conjunction with other tools to create more customized WooCommerce experiences for their customers, their clients, and so on. So with that being said and that out of the way, what exactly are you getting with Woolentor? Well, you're getting a couple of things. You're getting pre-designed layout styles for various different elements to do with a WooCommerce site. So things like, the sliders and tabs, custom action buttons, content style options, and so on. We're also getting slider and tab layouts. You're getting query setting options so you can create sort of customized layouts. You can customize what information is going to be displayed there and all those kinds of useful bits of information. There's a lot of things. I would recommend you take a look at this yourself to see if it offers the things that you actually want out of a customizer. The other side of it is we have a range of different widgets we can use inside Elementor itself, and that's kind of where we're going to focus today, and specifically on the checkout process, which is notoriously one of those things that's not very easy to customize. This does give you a lot of options. And if you saw my previous video on Elementor, and it's easy to get these two mixed up, you see how I sort of set that up to create a more customized checkout process. We're going to be doing a very similar thing here. And if you want to check out the Elementor version of it, I'll drop a link in the description below so you can take a look at that and see which plugin you think is going to be the most useful for you. So with that side of things out of the way, let's take a look at what we're currently working with. This is my demo page that I've set up. And as you can see, we've got a couple of products, what you'd expect to see on a typical WooCommerce site. However, if we come over to the checkout side of things, you'll see I currently have no checkout process whatsoever. So what we're going to do is we're going to customize this and create something more unique. Come back over into Elementor, and I've got my default checkout page open. And this is just the default checkout page that's created when you set up WooCommerce, and I've just removed the shortcode. So this is just a simple blank page now. With that being said, we come over to Elementor, and I'm going to do a little search for checkout, and that allows me to just filter out to see the different widgets that we have available as part of Woolentor. Now, excuse me if I call this Elementor at any point. This is Woolentor, and being so close together, chances are I'm going to stumble over it at some point, but I'm dealing with Woolentor. Okay, so you can see we have 8 different icons we can take a look at. We've broken down into the various component parts you'd expect to see in a standard checkout process when it comes to WooCommerce. And this is the thing you have to bear in mind. Even though we can customize the look of it, the layout of it, and various different aspects, it still operates within the confines of WooCommerce and its checkout setup. So just bear that in mind, that you are still going to have to make sure you have some of the key things that are required to make the whole checkout process work. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to just simply add in a 2-column row, and inside here we're now going to set this up to have the various different component pieces. Let's make a little bit of space for this by just adding some margins at the top. So we'll set 30 at the top, 50 at the bottom. Okay, so come back into our widgets, and again we'll just type in checkout so we can filter those out. So the first thing we have is checkout additional info, billing form, shipping form, and so on. So normally you'd have your billing form as the first item. So we'll drag and drop that inside there, and you can see this now inserts a standard looking widget that has just your billing details in. But what do we have available? Well, we've got the normal things like we can adjust the title for this. So we can easily change the details on this or set it up however you want. You've also got create an account label. So there's an option as part of WooCommerce to allow you to create an account if you don't have an account already. And this is where the sort of the meat and bones comes into this section, is the manage fields. Now, you can see by default, this is disabled. So what you're getting is just the standard WooCommerce fields. If we enable that, you can see nothing changes on the screen itself, but it does open up all the different options we have, all the different fields. So we can edit those, we can rename them, we can delete them, copy them, add extra ones in there, set up verification or validation, and all those kinds of useful things. So let's just open up first name and see what's inside there. You can see this is the field name, and you can see we can choose from any of the standard default WooCommerce fields. At the bottom, you also see we have add custom, and we'll come back to that a little later on. Okay, so what can we do inside here? Well, if you delete a field by accident, or you just want to add in another field from one of the predefined fields, you can choose anything that's available inside this drop-down list. You can come in and change the label for this. You can change the placeholder. You can insert a default value. You can even add validation. And if we click on the validation, you can see we can choose what type of information needs to be inserted into this particular field. And we can choose from any of the currently 5 options that are available. We won't worry about that at the moment. And the final option we're interested in is specifying whether this is a required field or not. So if we uncheck that, it's no longer required. If we check it, it is a required field. So it's really simple, straightforward. There's nothing particularly complicated inside there, but it is good to see you have access to all of these. So let's just say, for example, you're not dealing with, businesses, you're only dealing with the public. You may not want the company name, so you could delete that from there, and that now removes it. So you're also finding that this doesn't necessarily update on screen in real time, which is kind of confusing, and hopefully this is something that they will iron out, just to make sure that this just doesn't cause confusion with things like this. So this is something that I would like to see, and you're kind of finding this with several different plugins that are being brought out. They do kind of feel like they're being a little rushed, and they're not necessarily, fully featured, fully fledged, fully tested, whatever you want to kind of say. So just bear that in mind if you are considering grabbing yourself a copy of this. You may see some of these strange little quirks inside the actual editor itself. We can easily, like I say, come in and remove things, so you might not want things like apartment address. We could delete that from there. However, if we want to add new ones in, we can click to add a new item. So you can see that we can now set this up whatever we want. So field name, we're going to say add custom. And then what you can do is you can set whatever labels you want in this. So we can just say custom field, for example. And we've now created a custom field. We can drop in any validation. So we may say this wants to be a particular number. And you can assign a custom key to it. We can specify what field type it is. So we can say, it could be text, it can be a password, and so on. Do you want to make this required? Yes or no? Do you want this to be in the email? So in other words, when you send an email to your customer who's placing an order and fills their details out, or the email that you receive, you can choose the show an email and show an order detail page respectively to make sure, whoever needs to see this additional information will actually get this additional info. So that's the basics of how we can configure these different fields and manage them. Jump over to the style section, and we should now be able to style these. Now, it's worth bearing in mind, depending upon what version of Elementor you're using, if you are setting up theme styles, then you may find that that will override anything you set up inside here or anything that may be set up to start off with. So just bear that in mind. You may be wanting to set this up as a global style for your forms. It's going to have a knock-on effect. So just consider that when you're styling things out. But, we can still do things like we can adjust margins and padding, alignment for anything inside here. We can adjust the labels. So we can make the labels a different color or align them to a different side. And you can see that actually does update for us. We can say we want to specify the label color. So we could say we want that to be blue, for example. Your required color, we'll say we want that to be red. You can get really creative and make an incredibly ugly looking form like I'm doing here. But, you have full control over those sides of things. Okay, so once you've seen that, that's the basics of sort of like inserting and editing any of these kinds of things. If we now come back into a search and we'll just do checkout again, we can take a look at the next set of options. So we've created the billing details. Next thing you're probably going to want to put in there is your shipping details. So we've got a shipping checkout form. So we can drag and drop that over to the right hand side and you can see that now puts in the shipping details. And we have the same options available inside there. We can modify those fields, we can edit, delete, do whatever we want with those. So you have that control, and this is kind of where you're not only getting the ability to style and do all those kinds of things and build it up the way that you want it to look. You're also getting like one of those plugins that you normally have to purchase to be able to add extra fields in, remove fields, or if you want to remove fields, you could get into the functions PHP or use code snippets and then start messing about with the code editing that you can get as part of WooCommerce. But if you don't want to deal with that, this is one of those ways that you're getting a 2-for-1, shall we say. And this is where Woolentor also has a very similar set of options. You can kind of configure different things inside there, enable and disable fields and so on. Okay, so that's pretty cool. I like the idea of that. And, we can then use the benefit of using Elementor to style and configure these kinds of things. So we'll say there's the first part of our shipping process. We could now come down and say we wanted to put in some additional info underneath. So we'll drop a new block inside there. We'll come back in and we'll just do checkout. And this is where we can do things like your checkout methods. So we could say we want to drop in your checkout method there. And you see this now will line up with our payment options, however we're going to allow people to check out. Now, currently I've got nothing set up inside this demo site. But, if you're using PayPal, you're using, cash on delivery or using Stripe or something, they will all be listed inside there. And, the nice thing is you can then configure this to look any way you want. If we wanted to, we could just add another column in and we could just delete this from there. Come back over and we'll just do another search for our checkout. And you may want to do something like drop in the additional information box. And you can see we can have things like notes and so on in there. And again, we can modify the fields. We can add extra fields in, so you can get quite creative with how this is all being put together. So it does have a lot of options available. It's pretty easy to work with. And I think if you took a little bit of time styling this and configuring it, you could end up with something really quite nice. So I'm going to pause the video here. I'm going to edit the styling a little bit to make this a little bit more refreshed, look a little bit better. And I'll show you the kind of thing you could end up with then, with just a little bit of time and effort using Elementor to create some nice styling and, just get a little creative with it all. So I've gone ahead, spent a little time and just made sure the checkout now just fits in with the design aesthetic that I've been working with. So you can see it doesn't take a lot to make it all look nice and neat and tidy. I've added a couple of payment options in, so we've got this set up on the right-hand side as well. And it all looks pretty cool. Now, this is using the default sort of checkout page, but you can use some of the options inside Woolentor itself to specify your own custom pages. So I just want to quickly show you that. Let's come back into our checkout section. We're going to log out of this into our dashboard, and we're going to come into Woolentor. And inside there, we've got settings. So let's open up the settings. Now you can see we've got the WooCommerce Templates. If we enable and disable the builder, so we're going to have this enabled, and you can see we can choose any of the pages that we create or any of the templates. This is the thing, they have to be a template that you create, and then you can assign that to any of these default kind of pages of WooCommerce. So for example, we can see we've got the checkout page template, and currently I don't have any saved templates to use. We'd also see we've got checkout page top content, and this is where you can drop in the things like insert coupon code, insert sort of like login and things like that. So that's kind of useful as well. That's quite cool. And you can create custom templates like you would. So you don't have a reliance necessarily upon, Elementor Pro to be able to do a lot of this. You could create page templates, which you can do as part of the free version of Elementor, and then you can assign those templates inside here. So that's quite cool to see that you don't have a reliance upon Elementor Pro to do a lot of this kind of thing. There's another thing I want to show you before we wrap up, and that is if we come into the product section and we go to all products, if we open up a product inside here, and we'll open this hoodie with zipper, you can see we've got a new entry for Woolentor underneath the product data section. And this is pretty useful. And if you're interested in finding out more about this, let me know in the comment section below and I'll create some more content on this. What this allows you to do is effectively choose a template for an individual product. So you could create different types of templates. You could have a standardized template that kind of encompasses all of your products except for the ones you set up with their own custom template. So you could have something that requires different layout sort of structure, different information on it, and then you could assign that on a product by product basis. So you could create a range of different templates using Woolentor and then assign those to different products as you see fit on a product by product basis. So I thought that was pretty cool. Okay, so now we've talked about those templates and how we can use those settings and we don't have a reliance upon Elementor Pro. Let me just show you the very final thing I want to show you, and that's how we can create a customized cart page. So you've seen the checkout, which is probably the more complex of the two. The cart page is, again, one of those things that ideally you want to be able to customize to fall in line with your whole design aesthetic. And again, one of those things that's been notoriously difficult to do prior to some of these plugins. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to come into templates this time and go into saved templates. Now you have access to this on the free version of Elementor, which is great. So we're going to say add new. We're going to set this up to be a page. Now you're going to see extra options in there because I do have Elementor Pro installed, but you don't need it. So we're going to do this. We're going to call this custom cart page. And we'll just put template at the end so we know that it is a template file. Okay, so we'll create our template. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole process of how we make this look good and everything. You've already seen how we can customize various different aspects in the beginning of this with the checkout page. This kind of follows the same sort of trend, should we say. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to the settings and I'm going to turn off this title because I hate it. And we're going to come back in and we're just going to search for cart. Now we're going to have a mixture of different cart options inside here, but we're looking for anything that has the WL before it, which is the Woolentor options. So the cart table is, as its name suggests, the products you currently have inside your cart. You can see I've got one product inside there. And, as before, we have the manage table rows, so we can adjust any of these. And again, we can come in and we can change the title. We can change the heading, we can adjust the column width. So the remove, for example, we may only want that to be quite small. Well, you could set that to be a pixel value, whatever you kind of want to customize these. And if you don't want something, you can just delete it from there. So it's really super simple to do. The cart table action, again, we've got things like update cart. Do we want that option inside there? Continue shopping. Do you want to enable or disable that? If you want to have coupon forms in there, you may not offer coupons as part of your site. Well, you can enable and disable any of the options inside here. Come over to style, and as you can expect, we could style pretty much all aspects of this, from the headings, the table cells, product image, and so on. So we could adjust that to have a bigger version of the image. There we go. So really super simple. So I'm not going to go through all those kinds of things. I think that's very self-explanatory. We could then add in another section. We'll just set this to be a 50-50 row, and we'll come back up. We'll do a search for our cart options. And this time we're going to add in the option for cart total. So we'll drag and drop that over to the right-hand side, and that drops in our cart total. Do we want to use the default layout, which you can see is kind of using the normal WooCommerce layout, but you could disable that and then you can customize the various different titles and information that's going to be inside there. So this is great if you want to change the language that's used on your site. You may not use cart, you may not use totals or subtotals. You may use something different completely. You can customize every aspect of that inside this particular widget as part of the plugin. Style. All those options are available, so we can style this to make sure that the fonts and so on are all the same. So you can come and say, we're going to change this typography and we're going to use Montserrat, for example. We can select that. You can see that now updates. We'll change that to be a thinner font. We'll change that to be uppercase and we'll adjust the size on there. So very easy. And then we can just assign all the styling we want to this and all those kinds of super good things. What we're going to do now is we're going to say publish. We'll hit publish on there. And what we're going to do is we're going to come back out of this and go back into our dashboard and come down to Woolentor and into settings. From there, now we've created that custom template for this, we can assign it. So we're going to come to cart page template, select template, and you can see there's our custom cart page template. We'll select that, come down and hit save changes. So we'll just set that to be a value greater than 1. Okay, well, I didn't set anything in there, so we'll say okay. And we should now, if we come back over to our cart test page and take a look inside there, we'll refresh this page from the default layout and we should find there's our customized design. Now, like I say, we haven't done much customization, but you could easily set everything up so it all falls in line to the styling that you want. But it is pretty straightforward. I think once you kind of get stuck into this, you'll see that the plugin itself is pretty logical. Yes, there's some quirks, as we've seen, where things don't necessarily update when you're creating them, but they do appear to be sort of saving those changes and available to you on the front end. So it is there. I would say it's worth keeping an eye on, even if you think it's a little early in the stages of development right now and there's maybe a couple or too many bugs inside there from what you've seen in this video. However, I would love to get your feedback. If you use Woolentor or Elementor, which do you think is better or worse? Let me know your comments, any feedback you've got on these tools. I'd love to find out how you are using them, if you are using them, and any issues you've come across, to give me an eye-opener into, what's a good plugin to start working with, what's ones to recommend. But like I say, this is not a recommendation. This is just a demonstration of some of the things you can do with it. Up to you then if you think it's something that you want to invest your time, effort, and money into in the future. Now you've seen Woolentor in action, what are your thoughts? How do you feel it compares to Elementor? Could you see yourself using this, or have you already tested it out? Let me have your thoughts and feedback in the comments section below. Now, as always, all of the applicable links for everything I've covered are in the description. My name's been Paul C. This has been WPTuts, and until next time, take care.